Martin McDonagh has done it again. Banshees of Inisherin is one of the best films of the year. This man simply cannot miss to save his life. His weakest movie, Seven Psychopaths, is a certified banger, a hood classic. And yet, it's his worst movie. In Bruges is better, and Three Billboards is better than that. And now we have The Banshees of Inisherin, which isn't my favorite from him, but it is a great movie and one of the year's best. This is an incredibly simplistic movie, though. It's about two guys, just two fellas, two homies, two cool guys, elderly one and one not so elderly, that are friends, or at least they were friends. We don't get to see much of their friendship.
Stop running away from me like some fool of a moody schoolchild.
But you didn't say anything to me. You didn't do anything to me.
Well, that's what I was thinking, like.
I just don't like you no more.
They're best friends, or they were. We get introduced to Colin Farrell as he's going to Colum's house to invite him to the pub, which they frequently go do because there's nothing to do on Inisherin. But Colin says no. In fact, he doesn't open the door. He doesn't say anything. And suddenly, it seems like they're not friends anymore. Colin Farrell goes around to various people in the town that he's friends with, and he's like, what's going on with him? And they're like, I don't know. Are you guys fighting? Are you rowing? I think they say. And then we slowly learn what's going on. And it's one of the most heartbreakingly bleak and depressing movies that I think I've seen this year, while also being hidden inside of one of the funniest movies I've seen this year, which is a Martin McDonagh specialty.
How do, Pádraig?
Sit somewhere else.
Huh? But I have my pint there, Colin.
He has his pint there, Colin, from when he came in and ordered his pint before.
No. Okay. I'll sit somewhere else.
It's kind of like a breakup. It's like a breakup movie between two best friends. These two guys who just go to the pub and talk and have a good time. Now, Colin doesn't want to be friends with him, and Colin Farrell is just trying to figure it out. He's like the clingy ex. He's like me when someone breaks up with me. I'm like, what did I do? What happened? I don't think I did anything wrong. And then they just go, no, I just not feeling it anymore. And it hurts, and it sucks, and you kind of lose yourself to despair sometimes. And that's exactly what Colin Farrell does in this. He is the clingy ex-boyfriend to a best friend, now ex-best friend. And he doesn't understand that Colin just wants to be left alone. Colin has developed this sense of dread towards dying. He wants to be remembered. He realizes that he's getting old, and he doesn't want to listen to Colin Farrell drone on about donkey shit anymore. So he's like, you know what? I want to do something that matters. I want to make music. I want to be remembered for my music, because if I die today or in 12 years and I am just talking to Colin Farrell's boring ass all day, then I'll have nothing to show for it. And it's an incredibly thought-provoking idea. The whole movie is really about despair. It's about heartbreak. It's about loss. And it's incredibly potent and sad, because it is something that's incredibly human and something that every single person deals with in some way or another, whether it's with a girlfriend or a boyfriend breaking up with you, or a best friend that suddenly doesn't want to be with you anymore. It's incredibly tough when people you care about don't want to be around you anymore. And that's what this is all about. There's even moments when Colin goes to a priest and the priest asks him how he's dealing with despair.
Why aren't you talking to Pádraig no more?
That wouldn't be a sin now, would it, Father?
No, but it's not very nice either, is it?
At one point, Colin gets so fed up with Colin Farrell coming to his house so often that he says, I'm going to cut my fingers off if you keep talking to me. And it seems like an empty threat. It seems like he just desperately wants him to stop, so he's coming up with this mythical thing that he's going to do if Colin does it. And Colin does, and then he cuts his fingers off. Or at least he cuts one off, because he wants to play the fiddle still, and then Colin Farrell doesn't let it go, and he cuts the rest of his fingers off on one hand. And that's when the movie really turns around, is when he finishes cutting off one hand, essentially. That's when it becomes one of the most depressing movies of this year, because that's when despair seems to get the best of all of our characters. It gets the best of Colin when he's cutting off his fingers. It gets the best of Colin Farrell when his sister leaves, Barry Keoghan dies, and his miniature donkey dies, which is the best part of the movie, and that was so tough to see him die, the freaking little donkey. But that's when despair really takes hold of this movie, because most of it up until that point is pretty comedic. I mean, there's some pretty depressing stuff as well in it, but a lot of it is pretty comedic up until that point, and then it just switches. And it gets incredibly sad. So that's mainly the story. It's a pretty simple premise that's driven by characters, but it is interesting to talk about because of this angle of, I'm going to cut my fingers off if you keep talking to me. And that's sort of, again, going back to despair and heartbreak. That's a lot of people, I feel like, deal with that. In the modern world, it's a lot easier to not see somebody. It's a lot easier to not talk to somebody. On a mini island off of the coast of Ireland, though, it's a lot more difficult because you're living in a tiny community. You have like 15 people you can talk to, so Colin Farrell naturally wants to talk to. It's easy. He lives right there. I'm just going to go over. And in the case of modern world, you break up with a girlfriend or something, and you want to talk to her, and she just blocks you. That's kind of the equivalent here. Being blocked and cutting your own fingers off. It's kind of the parallels we're drawing here.
Why does he not want to be friends with you no more? What is he, 12?
What the hell's going on with you, me f***ing brother?
He's dull, Siobhan.
But he's always been done.
Another aspect of this story is the Irish Civil War happening simultaneous to the story, which is kind of metaphorical for what's going on with our main two characters. Two sides fighting each other that used to be friends. I think I wrote notes in this movie. Let me break out my little notebook. There's a part when Colin Farrell is sitting down with Colin, Brendan Gleeson's character, and he says, "Well, you liked me yesterday." And that's a perfect encapsulation of the Irish Civil War, which is happening just off the coast of Inisherin. You get to see little glimpses of it. You never actually see warfare. You just kind of hear it. And then at the end, Colin is looking over at the Civil War, and he's like, I think the war is dying down, or the fighting's dying down. And Colin Farrell says something to the effect of, maybe it shouldn't. Maybe there's no moving on. It's crazy. It's crazy that he said that. But it is interesting looking at this character that Colin Farrell is so perfectly playing, because the biggest reason why Colin doesn't want to be around him is because he's dull, which we've talked about a little bit. He's just a boring person. And I have written down in my notes, nice guys finish last. And that's another aspect of this movie that I find kind of interesting, is that Colin Farrell didn't lose his best friend for anything that he did. It's for stuff that he didn't do. It's for not being interesting, not being a person, really. He's just incredibly nice to everybody. And that's a good quality. Being nice to everybody is a good quality to have. But at a certain point, you do have to stand up for yourself. You have to be your own man. And that's what Colin is trying to push Colin Farrell into, whether inadvertently or not, by not being his friend anymore. He wants this guy to be more interesting. He doesn't want him to be dull. And that's frequently why so many breakups happen, whether it's between best friends or girlfriends or whatever it is because once you learn about somebody past that kind of mysterious edge they have, sometimes they just aren't that interesting. It's not just about despair. It's not just about heartbreak. It's not just about loss. It's also about trying to find yourself. It's about trying to become a better person. And oddly enough, no one becomes a better person, though. It's kind of about people that take despair the wrong way. Because despair can really help you. Despair can make you a better person. It can change you into somebody you should be from somebody you shouldn't have been. So, a lot of interesting stuff in the Banshees of Inisherin. Lots of interesting stuff here. If you haven't seen it, boy, I would highly recommend it. There's a couple things I don't quite love about this movie, which I guess we can talk about now, because why not? We're here. Mostly to do with effects. The effects in the movie I don't quite love. There's CG fire in this house that Colin Farrell burns down that doesn't look great. There's a prosthetic hand that doesn't look great. It's got all his fingers cut off. Colin cuts all his fingers off, which we should talk about. And the prosthetic hand doesn't look that convincing. And then some of the music choices I didn't love. There's a lot of like these bells, just like bells music. And I was like, okay. I get it. They're trying to go for something different than just the typical Irish sounding music, but it didn't quite work for me. Some of the fiddling stuff I really enjoyed, but there's just a couple little things here and there I didn't quite care for.
Let's just call it quits.
We won't call it quits. We'll call it the start.
It's bleak, it's dark, but it's also incredibly funny, it's witty, it's smart, And even though it's just characters talking in rooms, even if it's just about two people that are trying to mend a broken relationship, there's a lot more going on that's incredibly interesting about it. Because you can make a story like this dull and uninteresting if it is just characters talking in rooms about why they stopped hanging out. Why did you break up with me? It can get really sappy and boring, but there's so much more going on in this that's interesting. Not only that, but the cinematography, the filmmaking is fantastic. It's one of the best looking movies of the year. The locations they have are phenomenal. The production design is phenomenal. The 1920s aesthetic of Ireland is awesome. I loved getting into this world. I love the costumes. I love these characters. It's just a great movie, man, and I can't wait to see it again. I'll give it an 8 right now, but it could easily pop up to a 9 on a second watch. It very well could. It's one of the best of the year.